Hello and welcome to Sprogcast, a radio show all about pregnancy, birth and early parenting, hosted by Karen Hall and Mark Harris and supported by Pinter and Martin.
Sprogcast is back for episode 18. We're talking about Caesarean birth with Clare Goggin. We're looking at some of the things that have been in the news and catching up after summer holidays. I'm Mark Harris and here is Karen Hall.
Hi Mark, how are you?
I'm good. I a little bit jaded, if I'm honest. It's been a busy time. I was at the fabulous launch of Rebecca Schiller's book, Why Human Rights in Childbirth Matter, on Thursday night. And then I was at Millie Hill's, it was a fantastic conference, the Positive Birth Movement conference, Be the Change. That was extraordinary. And then I did a 2.5 hour workshop in Milton Keynes on the way home. So I'm feeling a little bit jaded. What about you?
Blimey, that does sound tiring. I would have loved to go to the Positive Birth Conference. It just sounded amazing, but we had a weekend away, so it wasn't possible.
That's nice.
Yeah, it was nice. I'm just sort of ramping up again back into work after the holidays. I've got a doula client and all the usual stuff going on.
Wow, a doula client.
Postnatal.
Ah, cool.
I did get asked for a birth, but it's just too hard.
Too hard?
Just,
what, the on-call?
The on-call is just impossible to manage because I have so many other little jobs.
Yeah, no, I remember when I first qualified, on the back of changing childbirth report, we had a caseload bearing scheme. And so when I was not working, my partner was working. So it was, 100% continuity pretty much.
Yeah.
And it led to 122 hours on call a week.
Whoa.
It turned me into a binge drinker. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
So I get it.
Yeah. And also, the one birth I did was so good.
Ooh.
Not sure I want to do another one in case it's not as good as that one.
Yeah. Good in what way, Karen?
Oh, it was just textbook. Everything happened as it should happen. It just gently panned out, and the mum was just transcendent. She was brilliant. She was just totally in the zone, and everything just trickled along, and it was really lovely.
I suppose it was textbook depending on which one you're reading, right?
Well, of course. I wasn't reading anything from, who is it, the Royal College of Gynecologists, that's for sure.
Isn't it funny how in our language, all these words, and I know exactly what you mean, it was good.
It was textbook in a Nina May kind of way.
And it was how it should have been.
Yeah.
It's funny, at the conference we were talking about being the change, and I spoke about transforming birthing culture. And, my catchphrase, believe nothing, test everything.
Mm-hmm.
And expanding on that and saying that when we come to a decision about what the truth is in terms of the evidence, it's not long before that morphs into a superstition in our behaviours. And how in the birth world, those of us that have been in it for any length of time know that there are so many areas where superstition reigns. Mm-hmm. Because this is what we've always done. I've never tested my belief in this so-called evidence to the point where I'm able to see clearly again.
Yeah, and absolutely, it may well be the case that other doulas are at births that don't go as straightforward and undisturbed as that one, and they might feel that's still the right place to be, and it was it happened as it should be expected to happen, yeah. And that could be an equally positive experience. I'm just saying, for me,
I know
that was
hey, I'm doing the interviewer thing.
Yeah. I'm answering your question.
I was being penetrating. Oh dear, that's probably not the right word.
No, I don't think so.
No. Anyway.
So, would you like to read out the sponsor mention?
Oh yeah. Sprogcast is brought to you by our sponsor, Pinter and Martin, an independent publishing company specialising in pregnancy, birth and parenting, psychology, nutrition and yoga. And you'll find them at pinterandmartin.com. We're on Facebook as well, by the way, facebook.com/Sprogcast. And as we say every week, Karen, we want people to get in touch with us. We want you to share it if you like it. and we'd love to increase the amount of people that get to listen to the show each month.
That's absolutely right. And we've also, this is the first time we've had a conversation, at least a recorded conversation, since Sprogcast Live back in July, which was a really just fabulous event. Highlight of the night possibly was the bit where you made Katie Edwards write a poem in 10 minutes, and she did.
Yeah, that was amazing. That was amazing.
But the stories, the speakers, the audience, it was all just lovely. It was another perfect experience that went exactly as it should have.
Yeah. Even though we were making it up as we went along, right?
We were a bit, weren't we? And we'd like to do that.
Bit.
I think again, should we go on tour? We maybe do another couple of Sprogcast lives in 2017. So if you can host us, please get in touch. Facebook and Twitter, as always. We can bring it to you, and I'm sure we can find some more people to come and talk. And yeah,
Karen, I think we pretty much decided that the very next one will be at Pinter and Martin again. Maybe midway through next year.
Right, okay.
No, all right.
That's a decision then. Super.
Sounds like me.
See you
then.
Like
I've decided, Karen.
Does, doesn't it? We had some really lovely reactions on Facebook and Twitter as well once I edited it together, and we published it in August, which I would have thought would be a kind of month when nobody had time to listen anyway, but we still got the usual number of listeners. So on Facebook, Zoe Crossley Woodman said, loved it, the poems were fantastic, again find myself shouting out loud listening to it in agreement, felt more emotional live for some reason, keep up the fantastic work. And Amy Brown replied, presumably to the bit about how it felt more emotional, that might be the wine. And it's true. All the photos of Amy, she is holding a glass of wine.
I never saw her without a glass in her hand.
No, honestly. And then we had some people on Twitter. Kay Hodgkins says, just listened to Sprogcast Live and thoroughly enjoyed engaging, positive discussion, re-birth and breastfeeding. Maddie, been totally gripped this morning listening to the latest Sprogcast, which was recorded live at Efraspace. I just say Maddie as if everyone will now know that that's Maddie McMahon. Emma Rosen, just listened to Birthright's story on live podcast in bits. How do I teach for the morning? Inspiring. And she added another tweet later that said, I love the bit about when you heal from a negative experience and that transcends into helping others. Beautiful. Lizzie Jane, spent my afternoon really getting down to sorting out my room and listening to Sprogcast. So excited for student midwife life to begin. So that's a nice one, isn't it? I asked her if she'd like to speak to us sometime, and she said yes.
Oh, brilliant.
Now that our Natalie is qualified.
She's the real deal.
She is. She's got a uniform and everything. Last comment on Sprogcast Live was from Alison White at Manor Mindful. Finally got around to listening to this live episode. #awesome, #undisturbed birth, #breastfeeding.
I'm just getting to grips with hashtags.
Are you?
It's my age, Karen.
Yeah, I know.
There's a lot of interaction last episode.
Well, it was the live thing, so yeah, we should definitely do that again.
Rocking. And next time, we'll do our best to live stream it.
Yes, and who will we get? Send us some suggestions. Who could talk or volunteer if you want to come and speak and you've got something interesting to say.
Yeah, I'm hoping that Dennis Walsh will come.
That would be nice.
For our next one, that'd be good.
I'd like to meet Dennis.
Yeah, he's cool. Yeah, I'm seeing him for a beer on Wednesday, actually.
Well, I know you meet him every week, but I'd like to meet him.
Yeah, no, he's cool. He's cool. I wonder who else we could get. So please make suggestions. In fact, people have suggested before, haven't they, really?
Yeah, well, we have suggestions, and we do take account, and we make it, and we add them to the list, and we listen to what people want to do, and we try and do it.
Absolutely. Well,
let's have a look at this news.
One of the articles that grabbed my attention, because we've covered it before, was the impact of estimated growth rates of baby through ultrasound on caesarean section rates.
Yeah.
It's written by Sarah Wickham, who we'd love to get on the show if her workload slowed down long enough so that she could do it. It's brilliantly well written and points to quite significant percentage differences when it comes to caesarean birth in relationship to estimation of weight. I think the highest percentage of caesarean section was about 18.4. Haven't got it in front of me at the moment. And that was when women had a high weight of baby predicted based on ultrasound, then I think the next stat is about 16%, and that's when.
Before you make up any more numbers.
Oh, go on.
The first one was 18.5. The next one is 13.4% of women who had their baby's weight estimated clinically. What does that mean? That the
palpation.
Right.
So that's a midwife has palpated and said the baby's big. And of course, in the Call the Midwife days, it would have been the same midwife palpating throughout the pregnancy.
Yeah.
So there would be more of a correlation with what was going on than probably happens today. But still, the difference between the ultrasound and the clinical palpation was quite significant.
But I think that the important point was that they were documented in their notes. So it was made a deal of.
Go on, carry on. What's the last figure?
The last figure is 11.7% of women, and these are the ones whose baby's weight was not estimated or documented. So 11.7% of those women had a caesarean. So it's quite a lot lower than the 18.5%.
And straight away, in my mind, it kind of points to largely unconscious, I would hazard a guess, but the largely unconscious tendency to grant technology more authority than the hands of a midwife or even a doctor for that matter. Do you know what I mean? The idea that it's an ultrasound, therefore it's more likely that my baby's going to be bigger, or certainly in the mind of the doctor, it's an ultrasound, so it's more likely to be correct.
Yeah, so you've got the technology topping the table there, but you have also got where palpation has happened and a midwife or a doctor has said, oh, you've got a baby of above average weight and made a note of it. Those women are in a more likely to have caesarean group as well.
And that makes total sense, though, doesn't it? Imagine you're a medical practitioner, with the women's best interests at heart. Let's assume, and I think that's the case in the majority of circumstances. And the birthing process isn't going as you'd expect it to go, according to your systems of measuring progress. And you've got this documented in the notes that there's potentially a large baby. Your threshold for making a surgical decision is going to be lower, and who doesn't sympathise with that?
Well, and also the parents themselves, if they've been told, oh, you've got a big baby.
Yeah. All of these things are having an impact.
They're worrying about what that's going to be like, and the worrying itself is going to be a contributory factor, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, certainly, all the stuff we know about how the birthing process unfolds in terms of the hormonal responses. We know that any sense of mulling upon a fearful idea is going to inhibit the flow of oxytocin and therefore potentially have an impact. And I think we've spoken about before that the accuracy of ultrasound when judging the weight of the baby towards the end of the pregnancy is very fallible.
Yeah, and I think the later ultrasounds seem to be less accurate.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the last paper I read, and I may be out of date on this, and I'm sure one of our listeners will update me. I think it's about 1.5 pound variation either way at about 38 weeks, which is a fairly big margin for error.
It is, and it can put a sonographer's kind of estimate of a large baby right back into the range of normal. And do we also have evidence suggesting that it is more difficult to give birth to a large baby, or is that not the case?
I'm guessing it depends on size and other relative factors. But I remember looking after a woman when a Rugby World Cup was going on. I don't know why I remember that. Yeah, I do. I know.
Was it on the telly at the time?
No, yeah, it was. And Jonah Lumo was making his debut on the world stage. And she gave birth standing up to an 11-pound, 2.5 baby. And I remember her husband going, he's going to be called Jonah.
Do you think there's a correlation between watching rugby and having a big baby?
I don't think so, but I think there is a correlation between mobility, between we know that a supported squat potentially increases the pelvic outlet by about 18%. it's not a static bone-like. It is a bone-like structure, but it becomes, very flexible with the impact
Yeah.
of relaxing. So her just standing up, and I remember the head seemed to be coming for ages.
Have you seen the ketchup bottle meme that's going around in birth world?
No.
There's an image of a ketchup bottle lying down with the lid off, and it's saying if you want the ketchup to come out, you don't lie the bottle on its side or on its back.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, but if you follow it through, you hold it upside down and you slap it, don't you? So I'm not really sure that's the best analogy. I'm not sure I would use it. So this is the article by Sarah Wickham on her own blog, sarahwickham.com, that we've been talking about. And she does helpfully summarise the research and then provide the abstracts if you wish to read it. We've linked it on our Facebook page.
Yeah, and Sarah, if you're listening,
please come and talk to us on the show.
If she's your friend,
pressure her.
Yes.
Right, moving on. Would you like to talk about breastfeeding, or would you like to talk about...
You go on. Started the last one.
I can talk about... You started it. Okay.
Go on.
Okay, so I noticed over the last week or so, perhaps this has got something to do with Amy Brown's book about to come out. So Amy kindly came and spoke at Sprogcast Live and is Pinter and Martin author. And her book Breastfeeding Uncovered is coming soon. Next few days, I think.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to our copy.
And I've just linked an article in The Guardian entitled Low UK Breastfeeding Rates Down to Social Pressures Over Routine and Sleep by Nicola Davis. And so it's a good article because it's got lots of contributions from various sources, including Rebecca Schiller, somebody else who was at our Sprogcast Live event. And it's commenting on basically the pressure for babies to conform and behave in certain ways, and the lack of support for breastfeeding being kind of very significant in the short term of breastfeeding in the UK. Yeah,
particularly focusing on sleep.
Particularly focusing on an expectation that good babies sleep, and actually had there was another comment on Twitter from a friend of mine, Claire McCowlan. Claire just remarked on Twitter, a friend of a colleague recently reported to say he would win the war over sleep patterns regarding his 1-week-old baby.
God.
But she also pointed out that, everyone's first question is about whether a baby sleeps through.
Yeah. I struggle to understand some of these emphases that we see in the birth world, because I think it's pretty much accepted that we are an animal, that human beings are animals. In the ancient tradition of being mammals over millions and millions and millions of years, this idea that somehow a baby isn't intuitively responding to those forces in the early days bemuses me.
But some baby mammals do sleep, don't they? What about baby rabbits? They sleep while their parents go off foraging.
I don't know anything about rabbits, Karen.
I don't know a great deal about rabbits.
I know they're very fertile.
Well, I remember reading about the difference between mammals who leave their babies to go off and forage and mammals who take their babies with them, that the milk composition is different.
Oh, that's interesting. And sleep cycles and feeding patterns are therefore different.
Yeah, and you couldn't risk leaving an awake baby to go off and forage. So it's necessary for those babies to sleep, whereas humans and other carrying mammals need to take their baby with them. Because it's known that those babies aren't going to stay asleep and stay where they are and be completely safe in a nest.
I know, I get that. That's interesting. In your experience, though, Karen, supporting a lot of breastfeeding women over the years, in the first 72 hours, babies' sleep patterns are different to what they seem to become after that period of time. Is that fair to say?
I have come across that, but I'm not a research study, so I can only say anecdotally, yes, I've come across that, but I've also come across babies that haven't been like that.
Yeah, true. Okay, no, I get that. So an interesting article. Another example of how when you live inside a culture, whatever that culture is, whether it's a family culture, a national culture, is that the values, the influences of that culture become almost completely unseen while you're in them.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I think there was a philosopher that called it the cultural habitus.
Yeah. The interesting thing about that, of course, is that you and I exist in a cultural habitat where we do know that babies need to wake up a lot. And we do understand what a baby's needs are, and we do have a good feel for what supports breastfeeding. But our wider cultural context is the opposite of that.
Yeah, and there are forces. We do speak about this a lot, Karen, but there are forces outside of that add their additional pressures. Like economic forces.
Yeah, Amy mentions that, and it comes out in this article.
Yeah.
Brown criticises aggressive advertising by formula companies and negative public perceptions of breastfeeding that have seen women asked to cover up when feeding their baby.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that comes up a lot, obviously, in antenatal classes. The perception that it's very common to be asked to cover up. And I point out that it's only in the newspapers because it's news. And if it was happening every day, it wouldn't be.
Yeah.
But it is so unhelpful to have these articles, Facebook and what have you, saying this happened. On the one hand, yes, you need to call it out. But on the other hand, it makes it seem to women that this is inevitably going to happen to them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Would you like to talk about this article from the BBC News about making babies without eggs?
I don't know what to make of that at all. Apart from the kind of undercurrent that I might have made up, it seems like men struggling with the power of women to birth, the source of mankind in many ways, the bringer of human beings into the world, and saying to themselves, look, how can we possibly exclude women from this process? Just don't get it, Karen.
It's such a strange thing to do, isn't it? So Dr. Tony Perry, we'll assume that's not short for Antonia.
That was my thought as well.
Seems to think that it's possible that in the distant future it might be possible to for two men to have a child with one donating an ordinary cell and the other sperm. So it's basically using your own cells, or one man could have his own child using his own cells and sperm, which sounds fairly incestuous and would be a taboo if you were talking about that within a family. But apparently it's okay for an individual. This was, of course, research on mice.
Yeah.
And doesn't really tell us an awful lot about what could actually happen with humans.
Well, you were making correlations with rabbits earlier, Karen.
Yeah, in order to demonstrate that humans are not rabbits.
There was more extrapolation in the article, weren't there, than there was much you could say was on the verge.
Yeah. It seems like sort of sci-fi, crazy, speculative nonsense to me. And my colleague and friend Maura Clark wrote on Facebook, but as John Cleese says in Life of Brian, where's the fetus going to gestate? In a box?
Yeah, excellent. That's a good comment. Good comment. If you look down history, aeons of history, when the masculine is confronted with the power of the feminine, there seems to be at least two responses to that. One is to seek some way to control the power of the feminine, and the other way is just to worship the feminine.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly in my career as midwife, the worshipping of the feminine, her power, her majesty, her intrinsic ability to birth has served me well. And in my relationship, it has to be said.
Yeah, good. Well said. I just think it's just, if the next logical stage of this was to discuss how men would then spend 9 months gestating a baby and then birth the baby and then feed the baby, that would be a very interesting turnaround in the way that motherhood is valued in society, wouldn't it? But that conversation doesn't seem to be happening.
No.
So for this episode, we particularly wanted to talk about Caesarean birth, and we've got an interview coming up now with Clare Goggin, who curates the Facebook group, Caesarean in Focus. It's a really interesting read, particularly if you want to look for Caesarean birth stories, positive stories, as well as some not positive stories and people's strong feelings about their experience. So we'll have a listen to Clare.
Well, I'm Clare Goggin, and I am the mother of 2 sons who were born by emergency caesarean section, and I am the founder of Caesarean in Focus, which is a change platform that is aiming to transform caesarean birth experience for women in the NHS.
Okay, and where can people find Caesarean in Focus?
We are on Twitter. Our handle is @C-section in Focus, and we also have a Facebook group, which I can send you the link for. I can't remember the exact link off the top of my head, but
that's fine.
If someone searches for Caesarean in Focus, they'll find it.
Okay, brilliant. So why does caesarean birth need to be transformed?
I think it's an area of birth that hasn't always had a huge amount of focus put on it. For understandable reasons. I think there's been a great push to try to transform vaginal birth and make it much more woman-centred. And more recently, there has been lots of work happening to look at ways in which caesarean birth can also benefit from some of those ideas around normality, and make it less about clinical surgical practices and more about being a life-affirming rite of passage for women, so that they actually get to experience the moment of birth in not necessarily to the same degree as you would if you had a straightforward vaginal birth, but definitely much more than you would under a traditional caesarean procedure. So I think there's lots of things regarding caesarean. The outcomes for caesarean birth generally tend to be worse. There's a greater propensity towards postnatal depression afterwards. Women struggle much more with breastfeeding, and they often have almost post-traumatic stress disorder after, particularly if they've had long attempted vaginal births before they've gone into surgery. So I think there's different terms for it. You can call it a natural caesarean. That was the original paper in the Obstetrics and Gynae journal, called it a natural caesarean. But I know that a lot of people find that quite difficult as a word because it is still a surgical procedure. But I prefer the term gentle caesarean, where really it just puts the woman in the centre of the process and enables her experience of that birth to be something that's really important to everyone who is caring for her as she delivers her baby.
So it's very much about making it much more woman-centred.
Yes.
And hopefully then a more of a positive experience in meeting their babies going through the birth. How can that be done?
I think there are 3 key elements to a gentle caesarean. I think the first one is that there is greater parental involvement in the birth. So, and it varies according to what the family wants, because different people, and particularly for people who are having their first caesarean, things like the lowering of the drape may be a bit overwhelming to them. They may be worried. I know that I would have been, when I had my first caesarean, worried about what you'd see and whether that would be a kind of traumatic thing to see that. It wasn't and isn't, and I would definitely encourage people to try to experience that, but it varies according to what each family likes. But definitely parental involvement. So that could be lowering the drape, it could be being able to take pictures of the baby being born, and that's something that had in my second caesarean, although it was still an emergency, because I had a birth plan for my caesarean, my midwife advocated for me in theatre, and we were able to get elements of a gentle caesarean in my birth. And the photos are just, I keep looking at them. It's those moments that, because when you're swept up in surgery, you don't really take it in fully, but you can kind of see that moment when you look back on it in the future, and it's really powerful. Other things that are around, particularly for elective caesareans, women may choose what kind of playlist they want, thinking what kind of mood or things they want to listen to while they're being prepared for surgery, and having the lights dimmed and things like that, so that it's much more intimate and much less about, bright lights and everything being scary. So parental involvement is the one of the main key elements. The second key element is slowing down the birth. This is where the baby is able to, once they've kind of opened up the incision, allowing the baby to kind of move out on its own and be kind of facilitated rather than delivered. So it's not a sudden, being hoiked out into the world. It kind of mimics a little bit more the vaginal birth and allows the contractions of the womb to push the baby out, and it helps to clear the airways of the baby and gives them more time for the cord to pulsate, and they get much more benefit from the blood in the placenta as well. So that's the second element. And the third element, which for me was the absolute most amazing part of having a gentle cesarean, is the fact that you get the immediate skin to skin. The immediate skin to skin just enables you to have that experience with your baby while you're still in theatre. In my first birth, the baby was taken away, cleaned, washed and dressed, and taken to the recovery ward by my husband while I was still being stitched up. So it was probably maybe half an hour or so after he was born that I kind of met him. Whereas in my second birth, he was with me the whole time while we were in theatre, and it was only maybe for a couple of minutes while they were literally moving me off the table onto the trolley that my baby wasn't with me. And it was just so powerful and such a much different experience. And you kind of get the opportunity to really connect with your baby and not think, oh, okay, that suddenly you're giving me this baby that I don't really connect to what's just happened to me, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's so the three elements are parental involvement in the birth, slowing it down and letting the baby emerge more on its own, and giving immediate and prolonged skin to skin in theatre for mother and baby.
Right. So, and if you could only have one of those, it would be the skin to skin.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you'd ideally want all
yeah.
three, but yeah, I think the immediate skin to skin is just, I think it sets all of the hormones in birth that you hear so much about when you're preparing for a positive birth. That it sets all of those hormones off. It helps you to connect the fact that you've just had a baby to the baby that you're holding. I think part of some of the issues that women have around cesarean is that they're kind of not connected, and that they're present, but they're also swept up in the process of surgery, so they don't always get that opportunity to kind of connect the moment of birth to the fact that they've become a mother, and that moment is delayed, whether it's a few hours later or sometimes a few weeks or months later, when they actually finally get that kind of real sense that they have that moment of birth, really, where they kind of really connect with their baby. And I think the more you can allow that to happen as soon as possible, the easier I think the subsequent recovery will be for women, because they'll have had that moment and they'll be feeling many more hormones and much more happy after their birth.
And there's ample research supporting the benefits of having skin to skin as soon as possible.
Yeah.
Whatever kind of birth you have. So that's well evidenced.
Yeah. I mean, I think for gentle cesarean isn't really anything new in the sense of what you actually do. I think it's just involving the new thing is bringing that into the cesarean experience. It builds on all of the best evidence in terms of what makes a good birth in general, really. And there's definitely nothing to suggest that there's any negative outcomes associated with gentle cesarean. Obviously, it depends on the clinical circumstances. If you're in a crash section, for example, it's not possible. But there are still things in any type of cesarean birth that you can do to kind of make that much more woman-centred. And it's just changing the mindset, really, to think, how can we make this the most positive birth experience for this particular family, and looking at how that can be achieved for them.
Do you find that there is much resistance to changing the mindset from the kind of point of view of the clinical staff?
There can be. I mean, in my own personal experience, I tried to negotiate a gentle cesarean as part, because I was wanting to have a vaginal birth after cesarean, a VBAC. But as my kind of plan B, I wanted to negotiate the cesarean. I sent them the original paper from the British Journal for Obstetrics and Gynecology, and they were just saying, no, we don't do this in our trust. It's too complicated to agree it. We need to involve too many people. In reality, on the day, they were much more open to it. I think it depends on who you get, because some obstetricians are more open to it, some midwives are more open to it, and some anaesthetists are more open to it. I think, though, there's increasingly a lot more positivity towards it. It's definitely starting to gain traction. I think it takes time for everyone to hear about new techniques and new methodologies. And there's a randomized control trial that's going on at the moment. I think it's UCH that's doing it, and once we start to get the evidence base behind it, I think it will start to kind of feed through into things like NICE guidelines and will become more mainstream. But it's definitely something that there's no reason, I don't think, why women should be refused it.
Yes, it doesn't sound complicated.
I think it's just people feeling comfortable actually doing things differently, really. And I think if a woman has any issues trying to negotiate it, I think speaking to a supervisor of midwives is really key, because they can really help advocate for you. And just asking them why it is that they're hesitant about it and trying to understand what their issues. I think sometimes people think that because it's a caesarean, you need to do everything really quickly because it's really, really dangerous. But actually, when you listen to the obstetricians who do it, they're like, well, actually, that there might be some bleeding, but you can stop the bleeding. You can kind of keep everything under control. It's not really, I think it's just a different way of working, and it takes time for everyone to come round and, get on board, really. But from all the women I've spoken to who've had one, it's such a transforming experience for them, particularly women who've had caesareans previously, who've had possibly traumatic experiences and found things really difficult. Most of the women I've spoken to say that it's really healing for them. It's not only a positive experience, but it kind of heals the previous birth trauma that they might have had, because they finally, even if they are kind of resigned to the idea that they may never have the kind of dream straightforward vaginal birth that they may have wanted, they get to have a beautiful birth and have that real woman-centered birth that they really want, and they get to experience a much more positive birth. So it really seems to help heal previous birth trauma in women.
Do you find that it is mostly people who've had a previous caesarean who are wanting to do this?
Most of the people I've spoken to, I don't think I've spoken to anyone who is a first-time mum who's, thinking about it off the bat. I think it's really, there's a common perception in the media that there is lots of women who want a caesarean, and actually, in reality, it's really, really low numbers. I think it's like 2% of the total births are women who actually request a caesarean, that's the only reason that they want one. I really think it's something that we should talk to women about when they're having their first baby as one of the options, so that they know that they can think about what they would want if that was the path that happens for them. So they can think, well, actually, I'd really like to have the drape lowered. So it's not when you're, like, say for a first-time mum who is in theatre in an emergency caesarean and someone says, do you want me to lower the drape? I wouldn't want that to be the first time that's been suggested, because it might freak them out. But if they've had someone talk about different things in antenatal classes and things about what could happen and how every kind of birth can be positive, then they might be able to make more of a positive experience out of any caesarean that may happen for them. But I don't think generally it's something that women are seeking out first time round. It's usually either they've had instrumental birth first time round where they're worried about things like their pelvic floor and prolapse. I see quite a lot of people wanting a caesarean for those reasons, or they've had maybe 1 or 2 caesareans and a caesarean birth after caesarean where they're just maybe not confident. They want to go to try again, and they want to kind of feel maybe a little bit more in control over what happens and able to be sure of a positive experience. And I think that's kind of what it enables you to do, although obviously any birth is unpredictable, and even a caesarean can have complications, so there's no absolute guarantee in any type of birth. But it does give women a bit more ability to have a bit of control over their birth when have had previous experiences of that not going so well for them.
I think it's something that a lot of the people listening will have heard about, but it's good to hear those sorts of details and how midwives can support women if it's something that they want to do in their practice, and also to be able to give them ways of finding out more about it. So that's so helpful. Thank you.
It's exactly the same philosophy behind it as there is behind all of the advocacy for more woman-centred vaginal birth. It's about placing the woman at the centre of birth and really caring about how she experiences her birth, and ensuring that birth experience isn't tied to birth outcome, and you can have positive birth experiences regardless of the mode of delivery that you end up needing or wanting because of clinical circumstances.
Okay, thank you very much.
Brilliant. Okay then.
It's great to talk to you, Claire.
All right, thanks very much.
Go and enjoy your holiday.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Cool, that was interesting, Karen. Claire spoke at the Positive Birth Movement conference, and a lot of people found her talk really insightful and interesting. There definitely is a groundswell out there towards gentle caesarean section, or whatever we're deciding to call it.
Yes, we're I think generally deciding not to use the word section.
Oh,
how do you feel about that?
I'm not bothered. I like the idea of not using it. Don't forget, I come from 20 odd years of midwifery experience where caesarean and section went hand in hand, because of where the incision is, and all that kind of stuff. No, I think it's good. In fact, I was only thinking the other day that, if language is at the heart of beginning to shift the culture, paying attention to the words we use is of fundamental importance, and eradicating birth language as far as possible from any Latin derivative or any medical jargonese has got to be a good first step. So I'm for it.
Yeah, I'm just fascinated that if somebody has with such a good understanding of the importance of language as you still find it very hard not to say section.
Yeah,
and I'm not. This is not as a criticism. I'm just sort of exploring the fact that it's hard for you not to say section. It must be really, really hard for the people dealing with it on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, it becomes, and my midwifery colleagues that are working in the NHS, I can understand them feeling it's almost an impossibility.
So do you think this is kind of Orwellian sort of newspeak? It's impossible to think a heretical thought because we don't have the language for it. If we don't say section, does that make a difference to women's experience?
I'm not sure it does when we begin the process. These processes of shifting cultures that have such a history it will take a while. But even 20 years ago, when a group I was in decided to wipe delivery off the board and write birth, that was considered ridiculous. And
what was the result of that?
It certainly had an impact on the small group of people that were pursuing it, and it certainly gave pause for thought to those that thought it was ridiculous. Did it have an impact on that culture over time? I don't know. As I look at birthing cultures over the last 20 years, I see change, but I don't see transformation. But I do think that language, it's what separates us from other mammals for a start. It's potentially, I think it has the potentiality it's almost the source code for creating different experiences. But your point is a good one. You see, I was immersed within those structures and cultures for many, many years. So at a deeply unconscious level, caesarean section comes out.
And so that's what that's the culture, isn't it?
Yeah. And like you say, I have a certain amount of awareness, but it obviously is still a default for me.
I like how Claire broke it down into kind of 3 ways that you could make a caesarean birth into a gentle experience, a more parent-centred experience. So involving the parents in the decision-making, slowing everything down, and having that immediate skin to skin.
My problem with any labels that we put on any of these things, gentle, gentle, the reverse of gentle is what?
Rough, violent.
If we label this way of doing caesarean sections as gentle, it has the embedded assumption that the other option isn't.
But some people do find that, don't they?
Of course they do, but some people also have a caesarean section the other way that they would label gentle.
Yeah, so that's okay. They can label it gentle. It's very much about what each person experiences.
Yeah, absolutely, but I'm just pointing towards the way our language is our greatest gift, but it's also our greatest shackling. We have a great potential to shackle ourselves through language as well as liberating ourselves.
Yeah. But it would be a shame if we didn't have any adjectives anymore, wouldn't it?
And I love language. Heidegger said language is the house of being wherein man dwells. My whole experience of life is shaped through the words I say to myself and the word that I speak out. So it's a gift to us, and it's a powerful tool, I think, for bringing about transformation in birth, but it's not without its challenges.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm
so surprised.
No, I love the way our discussion goes back and forth.
This is an argumentative one today, though, isn't it?
I like it. No, I like it.
Let's listen to my conversation with Natalie, which is much less argumentative. So here's Natalie, fully qualified. You've got your what have you got? A pin?
I've got my pin number now. Yes.
Excellent. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Worked very hard to get it.
You did. And we're going to need a new student now, aren't we?
Well, indeed. I'm no longer. I'm a newly qualified, though. So, it's still got its challenges. And the transition to be a midwife, I think, is still a massive hurdle.
Yeah. And also, you give us a practical perspective that Mark and I don't necessarily have. So we love that.
Yes, I'm there on the ground.
So we've been talking to Clare Goggin from Caesarean in Focus, and she was talking about gentle caesarean and what options parents might have, and I guess particularly with a focus more on a planned than an unplanned caesarean birth. She was talking about three key elements, one being to involve the parents in kind of talking about what their wishes were, like music and dim lighting and lowering the drape and stuff. And the second one was to slow the birth down, so not just hoik the baby out, were her words. And the third one being immediate skin to skin. And I just wondered if you, as somebody who's actually probably been in there and been part of all of this, if you have any perspective on that would be interesting.
Well, I think my perspective on it is that we need to just look to make birth more positive, which is what we've been trying to do in all aspects of intrapartum care. And if these are things that women are wanting, then we need to listen to them. It's really difficult because obviously people have practices that they do, and they have ideas about what way things should be run, especially in a theatre. There's that crossover between thinking, this is surgery, and sometimes the ways of doing things, they're very stuck in doing those. So the things about sort of like the lighting, that's something that I've not even heard a woman ask about the lighting in the theatre. Music is something that whenever I've talked to a woman about having an elective section, I do point out that there'll be music there. But I've never had them say, well, I want a specific music. But then maybe that's because I've not asked them. So, I mean, I think it's all about talking and asking what a woman actually wants in the experience. But again, it's how that is then taken forward, because change is a very, very difficult thing.
Yeah, so difficult, I guess, for clinical staff, but also for parents when you're talking about their perception of what to expect. So I had an antenatal group, first timers last night, including one couple who are having a planned caesarean, and we talked about this. And when I sort of mentioned the possibility of having the drape lowered, most of them looked a bit queasy. And when I talked about dim lighting, they were like, no, we really want the surgeon to be able to see.
Yeah.
And they were very much kind of, no, at that point we are handing ourselves over and we just want it to be done by people who can see what they're doing and are going to just take control and do it for us.
Yeah, I mean, there's got to be an element of that, hasn't there? There has got to be a common sense sort of approach in that, you say you want the surgeon to be able to see. But, in terms of the drapes and things, I sort of get that you'd want to sort of have a look and see the baby coming out. I think that's, really important, to women when they're having a vaginal birth. They get to see that. They get to see the baby coming out, and the father as well. But then, the sort of, surgery with all the drapes and, all the masked up and gowns and everything, it does seem a little bit strange to want to see it then. I don't know why. I still think it's a little bit, I could see why they would be queasy. And I mean, we do really, when we're in the theatre, we try to sort of, if the father needs to move around or wants to come round, sometimes we sort of have to say to him, you need to like look away if you don't want to see that side of things, and most fathers don't really, want to see that.
I suppose it's about choice again, isn't it?
Yeah, but then I saw, obviously, did you see the whole drapes that were clear? That you could see through the drapes through the whole thing?
No, I haven't seen that.
Yeah, there's a company, a woman has developed them, and and I thought, so that sounds quite good, because obviously you're keeping the sterile field, which again is very, very important, having an operation. So you're keeping the sterile field with the drapes up, but you can still see what's going on. So that sounds like a good idea.
Interesting idea. Yeah.
But then it's the thingy of the skin to skin and things like that. I think they're the things that we really need to sort of make sure they happen in theatres.
That's what we always conclude, whatever we're talking about, isn't it? At the end of the conversation, we go, skin to skin. That's the most important thing.
Yeah, it is. But then when you're practically there and when things are happening and, the theatres are, they are cold. They're, and you have theatre staff in there that, want to get on with their job, as it were, and they're sort of, they do put barriers in the way sometimes for things like that.
Yeah.
And they sort of say, we can do it in recovery. We'll get her through and you can help her in recovery. And, it's the midwife that needs to maybe sort of say something, say, well, no, this is what the woman wants.
Yeah.
This is what she said she wanted to do now, not wait until recovery.
How strong is your voice in a place like that, where there's the surgeon and the anaesthetist and the whoever else is on the team at the time?
Exactly, that is it. Whose voice is the strongest? But then in the ideal world, it's the woman's that should be. It's her choice. It's her body. It's her baby. And she's the one that's going to be doing it. You're not doing it. You're not doing the skin to skin. She is.
Yeah.
It's a massive change in attitude about it.
Yeah.
So we midwives are hosting a tweet chat about the gentle Caesarean on the 27th of September. If you're on Twitter, you just need to use the hashtag #WeMidwives and just join the conversation, and then you just join in. So we are advertising it a lot on We Midwives. So if you just check us out, you'll be able to find out more about it.
That's ace. Thank you very much.
See you later.
Bye.
Bye.
So what did you think about all of this? It's a hot topic, isn't it, for everybody in the birth world? Let us know, as usual, on Facebook and Twitter. We should mention our lovely sponsors, Pinter and Martin. And one thing that I think we mentioned before is the Birthrights Book Club. In October, they're encouraging people to host a fundraising book club to raise awareness of the importance of human rights in childbirth. So I'm hosting one. 19th of October in the afternoon at my house. So if you live local to me, I'm in Berkshire, get in touch, you can come.
Cool.
Also, and I don't know if you've seen it, Mark, but Becky Reed's book, Birth in Focus, has just come out.
Yeah, I've got it.
Have you? Isn't it amazing?
It's lovely. She's a midwife in the hero class, if you ask me.
It's just such a super book.
Yeah, it's lovely. It feels good as well, doesn't it? It looks good.
Yeah, and I took it along to my antenatal course, and somebody's actually borrowed it and taken it home, which I wasn't sure if it was something people would want to look at because the pictures are graphic.
Yeah.
And antenatally, I find that quite a lot of parents like to kind of think that it's all going to be covered in sparkly fairy dust, and there aren't going to be any of those bits exposed.
Is that your endorsement, that book?
It can be.
No,
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be. No.
Yeah, no, it's great. And also, there was something she wrote about in the end. I don't know if you've read the kind of text at the end, the final chapter, where she just looks at some of the evidence and thinking around birth. And she talks about a writing that describes the difference between a sanctum and a surveillance environment for giving birth.
Right. Well, I've only flicked through it so far, but I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, go on. That's my endorsement. Everybody should go and get that book. It's on pinterandmartin.com. You can get a 10% discount at the checkout if you use the code Sprogcast.
Right, cool.
What's yours?
Well, mine is a book that I'm just starting, but already I think it's a book I want to endorse. It's called The Meme Machine. And it does fit in very much with some of the things we've spoken about today. It's by Susan Blackmore, and I'm going to read from the back, if that's okay, Karen.
Yeah, go for it.
Humans are extraordinary creatures with the unique ability to imitate and so to copy from one another ideas, habits, skills, behaviours, inventions, songs and stories. These are all memes, a term first coined by Richard Dawkins in his book in 1976, The Selfish Gene. Memes, like genes, are replicators, competing to find space in our minds and cultures. And this enthralling book investigates the consequences, confronting the deepest questions from why human beings have big brains and language to altruism, sex and the internet. Susan Blackmore makes a compelling case for the theory that even our inner conscious self and our sense of free will are illusions created by the memes for the sake of their own replication. It's fabulous. In fact, it's kind of covering subjects that we've been talking about when it comes to why cultures form and how they maintain themselves. So thoroughly recommend it. I'm going to be devouring it over the next few days.
Brilliant. I've just put that on our Facebook page along with a link for Birth in Focus. So if people want to read what we're reading, it's out there.
Yeah. Should we mention that we're giving a book of why human rights in childbirth matter? Hopefully, I'm going to get Rebecca to sign a copy for us. This book is pretty spectacular. Although the book itself is worth the price. I think it's $7.99 at the moment, just for the appendices.
So what do people have to do to...
What do you think?
Donate £7 to Birth Rights?
Well, that would be a good thing.
If you leave us a comment, this month we will draw you from a hat.
Draw you out and I'll send you it. I've got to get Rebecca to sign it first. But cool. And that's all we've got time for today. On our next episode, we'll be talking birth stories and media with Dr. Rajana Das. If you have any suggestions or comments, please get in touch via Facebook or Twitter.
That's facebook.com/Sprogcast and @Sprogcast on Twitter. And if you're listening on iTunes, why not leave us a review? And thanks for listening for today. Bye.
Goodbye from me.
You've been listening to Sprogcast with Mark Harris and Karen Hall. Sprogcast is supported by Pinter and Martin. For all your pregnancy, birth, breastfeeding and parenting reading, check out pinterandmartin.com and enter the code Sprogcast for an additional 10% off. Sprogcast is produced by Karen Hall with technical assistance by Pete Hall, and our branding is provided by Nick Hilditch.